For the longest time, I've loved the Mario franchise, whether it be because it's simplistic and is a lot more fun, or maybe even just the fact that it brings me back to that childhood state of mind. I still find it fun to play on occasion. It was only recently I decided to pick up an old copy of the game for my N64. Granted, the thing was probably on death's door at this point, and just looking at it now, things kind of felt oddly bittersweet, especially given everything that happened. For me, it was a normal day, like any other, and I remember that as soon as I got the game and I started to play it, it was never really different. I've heard things online about the whole every copy of Mario 64 is personalized, but I never really applied logic to it, thinking that it could be true. Until I kind of realized that people probably got confused with ROM hacks, considering they were abundant now, and, well, it wasn't hard to find one. But nevertheless, I continued to play the game, going back to that whole thing, instead of getting off topic. It was normal. Nothing out of the ordinary. A few days passed, and, well, I found myself getting a little bit bored. So, I look at the cartridge, and, safe to say, nothing up with it. But I've heard rumors online about a specific thing you can actually do with a cartridge. It won't do anything grandiose, or so I thought, but if you had like a Game Shark, or something like that, you could actually input a certain code. I can't remember what it is, but if you do it, you could supposedly have access to a hidden debug level, one different to all the others. Now that being said, I didn't know about the whole Nintendo 64 mega leak at the time. I just kind of went along with it, hoping and praying it would work. Now that being said, it did work, and I found myself pretty underwhelmed by it. It wasn't anything interesting, just a simple room with the castle wall type texture from the outside, and amongst that, some other minor pieces of texture and out of place things. There was certain level geometry that probably was never seen before, and I was kind of intrigued by it. So, after a while of exploring and messing about, I noticed that there was a hidden remnant of code in the game that would allow you to perform some certain action with Mario. The action being performed was just a simple maneuver, a cut move. Apparently, it was sort of like a fear animation, where Mario would look around constantly, his eyes in that half-open state, like he would when he takes damage, but more fearful. I was actually surprised that it could even show that much emotion in the game. Nevertheless, I explored more of the geometry, and eventually, I found a star door that was locked. Apparently I needed a certain number of stars to even open it. The star number value, however, that I needed to even open it, didn't show up. Where a number should have been shown, it was blank. And that made me think that maybe it just wasn't possible. But then I thought of something. What if maybe this door was just a object designed to be the basis for all star doors in the game? That would probably make the most sense. Now, sure enough, time went by, and I decided to play the game normally. Still, with the same Game Shark at hand, just in case. And after a while, I then attained all 120 stars, and I thought about it for a second. I've completed the game, but maybe, just maybe, having this many stars could open that same door. It was crazy, I know. Even looking back on it, it just didn't make much sense to me why I'd even think that, but it was like this lingering feeling of emptiness. Like, even though I completed the game officially, there was something more to it than that. But sure enough, though, eventually I did get to that point where I was at the same place I was earlier. And the door opened, revealing an entirely different set of levels in a different castle. It was Peach's castle, but different. The walls were a different bricky-like texture. They looked sort of greenish, and the carpet was blue. Everything looked pretty much negatively colored, though. It's like how people said about the negative emotional aura with Wet Dry World. I felt this sudden urge to just leave. Not to mention that this was something that no doubt was meant to be seen. Part of me thought this could have been the earliest remaining bit of code left from the beta, but it couldn't have been. Nevertheless, I even thought about taking the cartridge out just to see perhaps if this was an even older copy, to see if there's any differences on the sticker of the game. But I could see it from where I was standing, and there was no difference. Except for one. Instead of the image of, well, how it usually looked, the image display showed Mario and Bowser in a sort of face-off position. And on top of all that, there was a weird sort of, maybe not glow, but really weird graphical texture, as if there was like a light beaming down on them. Now I knew this wasn't a regular copy of the game. This must have been some kind of beta version. And then my mind drifted to the whole personalization thing. This could not have been possible. No doubt. The AI wasn't developed, and as far as I know, this was all just some creepypasta. I walked around the level, or the hub world, as it's referred to. It didn't seem out of the ordinary. Well, for what it was worth. It seemed quite familiar with certain corridors and architecture, just like it would be with Peach's castle. I walked over to where the Bowser door would be, on the top little floor, and that door opened. And just like how there would be a photo of Princess Peach at the back of it, there was a photo, not of Peach though, but of an entirely different level. I could access the other doors as well, but they were mainly just copies. But this painting was different. The floor didn't cave in, and I was actually able to reach it. And the best way I could describe the painting would be, well, a Mario hat. I jumped into it, and the level was nothing at first, as if it was loading. And it did. The skybox came into view, and it was the same one from Bob on Battlefield. And the terrain loaded. It was a grassy area, but alien, and out of place. It wasn't happy-and-go-lucky, it was more monochrome, dark greens and a bunch of pastel colours. I found myself wandering throughout the level, and eventually reached this big tower-like area. I could oversee the whole map, and there was a couple interesting POIs. or points of interest. There was a small city near to the edge of the skybox, like in Wet Dry World, but not really as small, a little bit bigger. I was tempted to go over there, but something kind of drew me away from it. Call it the negative emotional aura again, but something felt wrong. As if it wasn't already, given the fact that the circumstances were pretty off, to say the least. And it was at this point I was about to turn back, when my game glitched, and my N64 shut off. I figured it must have been some kind of power outage, so I waited for a while and eventually it came back on. I was left at the same screen that I was before. The screen in TV would glitch constantly though, as if unstable. The level was now darker than before. I couldn't see the floor of the mountain that I was on, and the city had now darkened as well. In one of the buildings there was a light texture in one of the windows. I also noticed that there was a bunch of, I don't want to say dead, but unmoving bodies of Mario around the place. It's kind of like a graveyard for all the past lives or Mario's lost. I then finally gained the courage to walk around the level just a little bit more, and after a while, exploring the empty POIs, I finally went to the main POI, the mountain. Again, just to overlook at everything else. The city was still there. The other POI that I didn't really want to visit, but I was left with no choice. Walking over there was probably the hardest part of all this. As I did, the screen would constantly glitch, and for the briefest of seconds, I thought I saw lines of text appear on my screen. The first line saying, "Forgotten," and then the others were too quick to read. But as I then approached the city, I looked around, and I noticed that in that one building that I saw before, the light went out, and with that the entire brightness of the level. I was left in the darkness of it. Mario almost feeling his way around as new buildings popped up out of nowhere, some that I had never seen before. And the city always seemed to grow, bigger and bigger each time. At this point, the map probably wasn't even the same anymore. And as much as I wanted to deny this as a fact, this seemed to be true at this point. And the whole personalization thing was very believable. But then I remembered, at last, I could just switch off the game if I wanted to. And I did. There was no retaliation, just a simple shut-off screen. But even then, when I thought I'd be at my happiest, knowing that I didn't have to look at the game anymore, I didn't feel that way. Matter of fact, I felt worse. I sat alone in my childhood bedroom. My parents weren't back yet, so I was looking after the house. I could only stare at my TV screen and my N64, and with that, the game inside the console. I took it out, and now it resides on my shelf. Every night I go to sleep and everything seems to be normal, but I'll have dreams of playing Mario 64, just like I did in my childhood. But those dreams aren't happy. They're filled with horrifying induced nightmares. Ones that are almost too hard to wake up from. Ones that, after a certain amount of time, begin to feel real.